Good day everyone, War Never Changes here. Welcome to the third part of my Warsaken Standard tutorial using the Tabletopia web client. In this tutorial we will go through some basic Warsaken concepts such as resources, playing cards, as well as how the turns function. In the next tutorial we will demonstrate the full Warsaken game, so if you want to skip to that step, you can go to the video 4. Let's begin by going through the winning conditions of Warsaken. Winning in Warsaken is pretty straightforward. You simply take out the opponent's leader card. However, the leader is protected by a concept called uncompromised, which essentially means that you cannot target or attack your opponent's leader. Your first goal is to remove the uncompromised status and compromise the leader. And there are 3 ways to do this. The first way is pretty simple. Every leader has territory cards. If all of these 4 territory cards are destroyed, the leader will be uncompromised, and you can attack him directly using cards that deal damage. The second option is to take out leader's moral. For example, in the case of Lockwood, he has a 19 moral, represented by this token. If this value is reduced to 0, either by the penalties given by destroyed territories, cards that directly affect his moral, or by destroyed buildings, he will be compromised and can be eliminated, as the Warsaken rules say. The third option is running out cards. Essentially, if you no longer have any cards to draw from, your leader will be compromised, but you do not automatically lose the game. You will only lose the game once your leader is eliminated, contrary to some other card games. Let's take a look at the field now. The entire gaming field is called the War. The center area is called the Battle, and it's split between 2 areas. As you can see, there is a symbol for Warsaken in the middle. The cards on your side are your legion, and the cards on that side are your opponent's legion. Legion consists of all your forces, as well as your buildings and other effects. Then there is the leader card, the trackers for his statistics, which are the moral and inter value, the 4 territories for both leaders, as well as your deck, which is called Arsenal in Warsaken, as it consists of all your military units and assets. Then there is this card pile, which of course represents all the forces and cards that have been used or eliminated. Then there is a resource bank, which in Tabletopia represents all the resources your territories produce. Think a bit like Monopoly. When you gain money, you essentially take some tokens here and put them on the cards that produce them. I will go through that in a bit. Then there is the dices and counters bar, which I already covered on the earlier tutorial. Before you start the game, there are some things that you need to check on the board. I specifically picked this pair, Lockwood versus Soft, because I know that the board is not entirely correctly set, so it's a good example to have. First thing are these leader timers. They are generally labeled 2 for the first ability and 5 for the second one, though exceptions do exist. Just select the Set To option for these timers and set them correctly. The timers on the soft side are also selected wrongly, but I will just simply do it in reverse order. Then you should read your territory cards and make certain that all the effects they have are applied. In this case, I have a card called Burner's Supply Factories that has an effect called Supply. Produce 2 extra resources on your first turn. On normal gameplay, this effect activates on first turn, where instead of producing set amount of resources, you get 2 extra. However, on the Tabletopia client, this is already preset, so I highlighted this so you know why the game board has 2 resources attached to this card. Third one is to shuffle your decks. As I mentioned in the previous tutorial, all the decks are in a set order, so unless you shuffle, you always get the same cards. Next step is optional, but I recommend you do it, which is basically get some dices and counters, or tokens as I keep calling them, onto the field. This makes it a lot easier for you to actually prepare for different situations. And as you can see, it's surprisingly easy to misclick things. So you should always pay attention in Tabletopia, and remember, it doesn't matter how many mistakes you are doing, since you are probably playing with a friend. I'm certain they won't be too mean about it. Well, we all do have that one friend that is there. Now, as the board is set, I will go through some basic concepts that are important for Warsaken gameplay. First thing we need to cover before going to example turn of the game are the resource mechanics, as well as how the cards are read and played. Let's start with the territories, since they are easiest ones to understand. All cards have a text here that indicates what card is in question. Then there is a label that tells what type of the card is, and in this case it's a territory with a sub-territory type of power. It has no attack power and it has 450 health, which means you have to take 450 damage for this territory to be eliminated. It has a symbol 1 per power, which means it produces 1 power every turn. And if it is eliminated, your leader loses 5 morale. Let's look at the force cards next. I set the deck in a bit of specific order so I can showcase a lot of them. Let's take this Panther 2 as an example. You see there are a lot more symbols in this card than there would be on the territory card. Namely, this symbol here, which tells how many turns this card takes to be prepared on the field. Which essentially means if I would play this card, it will come into game face down, I would clip it on my hand, put it on the field, and assign a timer on top of it to indicate how many turns it takes for it to be ready. Before I do that, however, I need to pay the resource cost for this card, which are indicated here by these symbols. If I put this card here and zoom in, let's hide my hand a bit. You see that all the territories have different type of symbols that correspond to some of these icons. In this case, let's consider this to be the first turn. I would have the following resources on my territories. This one has extras, remember, due to the special ability. Now, should I want to play this card, I would have to match these values here. This is simple. One gear icon is 1 equipment resource. The one fuel icon is, of course, fuel canister. But now things get more complicated. There is this interesting white star here that, if you look at the resource bank, indicates a generic resource value. Now, as you can see, none of my territories actually produce generic resources. So I'm a bit of a bind here, or am I? Generic resources are like money. Essentially, you can get money by selling other resources. So if you need a generic resource, you can replace it by any other resource you have at hand. Let's say with one more equipment resource. In this case, now I would have the correct amount of resources, 1 equipment, 1 fuel, and 1 equipment representing generic. Now, I would first put the resources on the field, like so. Then I would flip the card in my hand and play this card on top of these resources. and then assigning counter on it. This is because according to Warsaken rules, if I make a misplay and let's say use wrong resources, once this card is ready, my opponent is allowed to check the resources. And should they found some foul play, I would actually lose the card, so it's a pretty important mechanic to remember. This is the foundation how you play most of the cards in Warsaken. There is an exception that doesn't actually use any resources, which is called the weather card. So I have in hand. It's called Freezing Rainstorm. As you see, that's a subtype of weather and icy. Prevents all forces from attacking and blocking, and power territories for production. Weather cards would be played on the middle of the game, and they affect both players, so be careful with them. There is no resource cost, so you can use them, but you can only use them once on your turn, and as I said, it also affects you, so you are unable to attack this turn if you would use them. The second type of cards that uses resources are building cards. In this case, the Interrogation Facility card, which has a preparation time of 1 and 1 generic resource and that an effect in producing intel per turn. Building cards are interesting game mechanically, since they are a bit like territories. Once they are played on the field, they will stay on the field and do what they do, they produce things. But they can be targeted and eliminated by your opponent. I will cover that a bit in detail when I will demonstrate attacking. Second card type to remember are the intercards. As you can see, this is an intercard with the subtype of innovation that lets you look for top 4 cards and put them back in any order, then draw a card. Which I will demonstrate how to do it in a moment. But it also has a very specific requirement at the bottom that says lead or be 6 away in intel to play. This is because this game has a concept called intel warfare. It essentially means how advanced your faction is at spying and finding intel about your opponent's maneuvers. If your intel score here is increased to value of 6 or higher than your opponent, that has to be the difference between the two units. Once that is filled as a condition, you will completely prevent your opponent from playing intercards. That is why inter-warfare is really important part of the game, since most of these intercards are, as you can see from the recon effects, they are deck search mechanics. So they allow you to find other cards and play them faster, or they allow you to hinder opponent's ability to play cards. Another card type is moral card, in this case cut corners, which is a really powerful card and it has no preparation time, so if I wanted to, I would just put a 1 power resource on the field and play it like this. And all its effects would apply immediately. And there are some interesting setbacks for these moral cards, which are card specific, so I recommend reading carefully what this card will do. In this case, it would actually decrease my own moral by 2, which I would simply reduce by, this time, using my mouse scroll and rolling it down. Because I'm basically forcing my forces to do something fast, they don't like it. But what it would allow me to do is decrease a specific non-leader timer by 1. Of course, once every card is used, they would be going to discard pile. The next type of card that you need to know to cover all of them is the VMD card, which means Weapon of Mass Destruction. These are extremely powerful cards with very powerful effects. In the case of this card, it would simply eliminate an enemy territory altogether and prevent 2 of them producing resources. Which, let's say for example, if I would target furnace supply factories, would factor over, well, at least 400 damage. Technically the damage potential is infinite, but it hits only 1 segment of the card. They are also extremely expensive to use and take a lot of time to prepare, which means you can hasten them with the cards like Cut Corners or delay them with cards like Calculate the Stagnation. These are the main card types in Warsaken. As I said, they are moral cards, building cards, intelligence cards, force cards, weather cards, and weapons of mass destruction. Now, let's cover one specific card type in particular in a bit more detail. The force card. Force cards are the cards with attack and damage values. This means these cards are the ones that mainly attack opponents' territories or block other opponents' attacks. Let's take a few cards from the soft side of tech and see if we have any forces there. Oh, there we go. We have the G6 and Apex back, which is a really powerful card. And then let's put the rest of them back here. Now I will demonstrate how these would interact with each other. Let's say I'm attacking with the sword in the battle phase. I will get to later. I would use this card to attack, and I would declare one of these territories as a target. I wouldn't be able to declare these force units, but I would be able to declare, let's say, this interrogation facility card as a target if I wanted to. Then my opponent here would choose if they want to block a card or not. There are other factors here that we can account for, just as the effect of stealth which this unit has that prevents some units from blocking it. But generally it would work like this. I will declare, let's say, Panther will attack the Fermi energy plants here. And any other forces I have would also be declaring their attacks this turn. Since all the forces have to have a target, you cannot just simply attack one by one. You will always designate all your forces at once. And once you have done that, then your opponent gets to choose if they want to intercept them or block them or not. In this case, Apex wouldn't be able to block since it's unable to target stealth units, but the G6 R75 drone would be able to, as it's a stealth unit. So these two cards would be doing a battle during battle phase. How this works is that these cards, if they do not have mechanics that claim otherwise, will always be attacking at the same time. In this case, Panther would be doing 80 damage to G6, which has only 30 health, so this unit would be eliminated. And the G6, which has 40 damage, will be doing 40 damage to Panther, which is 90 health, meaning it will survive. So this will be eliminated, but something's happened. If these cards would have no special mechanics, it would block the attack entirely. But since this has a Blitz mechanic, it does some damage through, namely the attack value minus the health value. So in this case 50 damage. And this card gets eliminated. And I would reduce this value by 50, indicating that it was hit. And once the attack is done, I would flip this card like this. This means that since this card is facing towards my field, that it's returning from battle and is unable to block until it's my turn again. So next turn, should Soft choose to attack with this Apex, there would be no forces here to block it despite this card being here. And I would take the territory damage directly. Now, I will demonstrate how the turns function in Warsaken. And then on the next tutorial, I will show you a full game and explain how things first work as it progresses. So, in Warsaken, you start by drawing 8 cards. There are some other things to take into account, but this is an example turn. First thing when you start a turn is your force's return. This refers to what I showed earlier with the force being returning like this towards you. So if I would have, let's say, this TX6 on the field and it would have theoretically attacked, I would just flip it towards the opponent and it would be ready on this turn. After the return phase, I will be drawing 1 card. Then I will go through all the cards and see if I have any timers on the territories. I don't. And then I will check if I have timers on the leaders. Now, since this is a demonstration, I will reduce these timers by 1. If I would actually go first on a game, I wouldn't actually reduce these timers, but I will cover that in the next tutorial in more detail. Then I would go through and check the timers on the field. So let's say I had this one here, face down on the field with a timer on it. I would now remove the timer and put the card in ready situation, but I don't have any cards in that state now. Then once this is done, I will produce the resources. And as you can see, these symbols here indicate what resources each of this territory produces. In this case of Vernon's, it has these 2 symbols here for the equipment resources. Delphine Bay actually lets me choose between fuel resource or equipment resource, so I will choose a fuel resource. Trident Oilfields only has 1 symbol, so it produces only 1 resource. And same for the box and coal plants. Then we enter what we call the play phase. In play phase, I can play any cards I want, including weather cards. In this case, I have a unique opportunity to actually demonstrate how deck searching works in a way, so I will do that. I will first indicate the resources I want to use. In this case, I will use 1 power, and as you can see, Standard Recon has a generic resource requirement, so I need to replace something with the generic resource. So I will use this 1 equipment resource as generic and play the Satellite Recon card. Now, Satellite Recon says, Recon, look at the top 4 cards of your arsenal, then put them back in any order and draw a card. Now, there are many ways to do this, but the simplest way is to do it like this. Select all your cards, click them, and put them underneath your leader. Now, the reason I do this like this is now your opponent sees that I have no cards here, as you can see on my portrait. And this one lets me look at the top 4 cards in my arsenal, but it doesn't let my opponent to see them, so I can just draw these 4 cards to my hand. Then I select which cards I want to return to the pile in which order. And I'm flipping them and snapping them so my opponent doesn't see them. And it says that the 4th card is drawn to my hand, so it's put top of the pile. And then I can just put it like this in the field and add it to my hand. Then these cards that I used will go to this card pile and all the resources will go to the side. Now I can play as many cards as I have resources for. If I wanted to, let's say, play this CX6 card, I would need to use 2 generic resources for it. I would be using equipment as a replacement here. And it has a timer of 1. Now I also have Cut Corners card in my hand, and as you know from earlier example, it allows me to decrease a specific non-leader timer by 1. So I'm gonna show you how the other way to convert resources work. As you see, this has a resource cost of 1 power, but I have no power resources left. As you know now, you can replace 1 generic resource by any specific resource I want, but how does converting specific resources work? It's simple, it's more expensive. So if I want to play this cut corner, I need to replace 2 resources on the field for its costs. It simply costs 2 of any resources, be it generic, be it food, be it power, be it fuel, be it equipment. You always have to have 2 to play 1 specific resource, while in the case of playing generic, you only needed 1. So this is a pretty expensive move to play. It also costs me 2 more, which I will reduce. But now I would be able to reduce this timer by 1 and play it immediately. And then of course I will be remove the resources. Now the reason why I did this is not only to showcase how the replacement of resources works, but also to show how all the card effects work. Basically, now that this card went from preparing stage to ready phase, this card has all its effects activated immediately. And since the X6 is an 8 unit, it produces resources. So this move would allow this card to produce resources immediately. What is important to know about resource production is that it always happens only once per turn, but it will always happen if it's possible. So if your opponent somehow prevents you from producing resources, if you are able to remove that condition, you would still produce resources even though it's not the resource production phase. Now I don't have much cards I could play. I could of course play this one if I wanted to by placing one of the fuels which it requires by generic and equipment, and one generic as generic, and flip it face down if I wanted to, so I'll just do it. And then I would either do something like play a weather card, since I don't need to attack, or I would go to battle phase. Now, I have one unit on the field face up, but it has no damage, so if I would attack with it, it wouldn't actually do any damage, and it would go to the return phase. So I'll just leave it like this. And then I would say I end my turn, and my opponent would do whatever they want. This is basically the basic turn of the Warsaken. And just for rehearsing, I will just repeat all of things that you do. Your forces will first return to base, then you will draw a card, then we check all the timers and reduce the timers by 1, including the ones on the field, and then you will produce resources to your cards, and then you will play cards, and after playing cards, you will do battle. Return, draw, reduce, produce, play, and battle. That's the turn order. This covers most of the basic functions of Warsaken, the most important ones being the resource mechanic, which is, again, you can use any single resource to replace a generic resource if you want to, like this. Any one of these, just one copy, or if you want to replace any of these resources with something, you have to use 2 of the other resources. Can be same, can be different, but you need 2. And the second one is the turn order. On the next tutorial, I will put all these lessons into practical use and demonstrate a simple match where I play both sides and explain every turn and what I do. So you get a better grasp about things explained here. So don't worry if it seems complicated. Once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty simple. As always, thank you for listening, and I hope you will enjoy Warsaken.